Hi friends, good evening. Welcome to this free live session exclusively brought to you by TalentSprint. Now before we get started with today's session, I thought we'll take some time and understand what's happening on the IT front to begin with. Now a lot of us are aware, that though hiring has pretty much come down in the IT sector because of slow growth and also because of increasing automation on some services like infrastructure management and testing. The good news is there are opportunities in product companies, right, and firms. So cloud services which require unique and specialized skills. What we also need to understand is a lot of US companies are still setting up operations in India and companies are shifting to India. Now, co-founder N.R. Narayanamurthy of Infosys, right? He says that the Indian IT industry will grow 10% despite the H-1B visa issue. So what that means for you is, let's say there were 500 offers, right, through campus recruitment for you last year. This year, the number might remain the same, but it may not be just for your college. Another 10 colleges may be included, right? Which only means that you need to pull up your socks and buck up and ensure that you qualify even though the number of offers have come down. Which means you need to be that much more prepared, that much more confident in clearing the interview rounds, right? And that's where we come in. That's where we come in the picture to help you qualify and clear those rounds. Now, most of you are aware that we have been conducting various sessions on quantitative aptitude, reasoning, computer programming, because I think the first hurdle that most of us find challenging is to clear the aptitude round in the interview process, right? So that's where the focus is, and that's where you need to ensure that you have what it takes to clear the aptitude round and move on and get qualified, even though the competition is really, really tight. So in today's session, we're going to be focusing on the verbal ability section, of course, and we're going to look at one question type where we'll be trying to understand how to logically look at sentences and make sense in connecting them, right, to form a meaningful paragraph or a meaningful passage. So there are various patterns to this question type, right? It's para jumbles, there are sentence jumbles, and the way the question itself, the format itself varies, right? So we'll take time to look at each of those different formats, and we'll try and also focus on what strategies or concepts that we need to fall back on to ensure that this question type does not pose a challenge to us, right? The advantage or the best part is if you learn to focus on these strategies for para jumbles, it will help you in a lot of other question types also. So before we get started, I'd also like to take time to acknowledge those of you who are here. So let me just say a quick hi to all those out here. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to say hi to everybody. For some reason, I'm unable to see your names. Maybe you're all just silent spectators. Okay, so thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. We will get started with the session. If you have any questions, feel free to put it down on the chat. I'll answer it during the course of the session. In case I miss out, I will answer it towards the end of the session. Okay, so let's get started. Hi there, Harsha. Okay, so out of a whole lot of people watching, Harsha says hello. Hi, Harsha. So let me share the PPT with you guys, and then we get started. Okay, great. So the first pattern that we're going to C, let's read the directions. It says, in the following questions, a passage consists of 6 sentences. So the initial part, sentence 1 and sentence 6 is given. The middle 4 sentences have been removed and jumbled up. Okay, so these are labeled PQRS. You are required to find out the proper sequence of the 4 sentences. So for a pattern like this, usually what we do is we keep looking at the options, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we keep looking at the options, and then it becomes easier for us to quickly arrive at the answer, saving time. And we're also going to apply some key approaches and strategies, like there will be some keywords in the context which will help us connect one sentence to the other. Let's read the sentence 1 that is there. It says, what kind of India are we working for and what kind of world? Right? And then there is sentence 6, which says some small part of that dream has come true, but not in the manner I had imagined, and so much still remains. There's a little bit of typo error here. Okay. All right. So having looked at this question pattern, are you able to quickly figure out some keywords? So there is a question which says, what kind of world we live in, right? What kind of India are we working for? One strategy that you can apply is quickly look at PQRS and see which of that sentence is answering that question, right? That's one way to go about it. Because sentence 1 starts with a question. Look for the answer to that question. Which sentence? P, Q, R, and S. Anybody can go ahead and give me the answer if you know it, or if you've been able to identify the answer. Or we can also look for clue words and keywords, right? Sentence 6 says, that dream, right? That's a keyword again for you. What dream are they referring to? So there must be a sentence talking about or making reference to that dream. Which sentence is that? That's another way for you to go about it, right? So Harsha says, I think it's option 4. Let's see. It starts with S. Are hatred and violence and fear and communalism and narrow provincialism to mold our future? Right? So what kind of world we live in? S rightly answers that, there's a lot of hatred and violence, there's fear, there's communalism, there's narrow provincialism. All of these kind of depict the world that we live in, or the India that we live in, or that we're working for. Great. So I have 2 options with S, 3 and 4. We just need to figure out, is the sequence right? Is QRP the right sequence or PQR the right sequence? Right? So we've narrowed and limited our options. So out of 3 and 4, quickly, like I said, I've already identified the keyword in sentence 6, which is that dream. Can somebody tell me, that's the last sentence, right? Does P make reference to that or R makes reference to that? If you look at P, it says, surely not if there has not been any truth in us and in our profession. R says, I'm looking at, the last connect to sentence 6, right? Was there any real substance in those dreams, or were they merely the fancies of fevered brain? So there is a connect to the keyword, those dreams. Let's look at Q. Here in the city of Allahabad, my boyhood and youth were spent in dreaming dreams and seeing visions of India's future. So I see a direct connect between Q and R, right? Q and R is a good connect because Q introduces the dreams, R is referring to the same dreams, those dreams, and then sentence 6 completes, again making reference to the keyword dream. So out of 3 and 4, Harsha, you just slightly missed it. The answer is option 3. Now let's look at the sequence and see if it makes logical sense. What kind of India are we working for and what kind of world? Are hatred and violence and fear and communalism and narrow provincialism to mold our future? Surely not. So is this, again, this is another question, right? And then P says, surely not if there has not been any truth in us and in our profession. Moving on, QR. So the right sequence is option 3 and not option 4. Because P does not directly link to the last sentence, S6, but R does with the keyword, which we've seen following. So the write sequences PQR after sentence 1 and not the other way around. Yeah, I'm sure Harsha got that. Any questions on this before we move on to the next question? So this is one pattern, right, where I've given the initial, the topic sentence and the closing sentence, and the remaining sentences in between are jumbled. I need to figure out the sequence. So the strategy that we've applied here is, because it was a question format, it was easier for us to look for an answer to that question and then look at repeat words, right? If you say, hey, I have a difficulty identifying the keyword in a sentence, look for repeat words in the context. And if you see, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences, 3 sentences have dream. That's a repeat word, right? And then you see how you can connect those repeat words and which would be the right sequence pattern, which is option 3. Let's move on, since I haven't got any questions from anybody. Let's move on to the next pattern. The next pattern, you don't necessarily have a topic or a closing sentence, right? It just said there are a couple of sentences given and you just need to figure it out. So give me a second, because the way the question is listed here is going to be slightly difficult for us to figure out. So I'm just going to make some quick changes. So bear with me for a couple of seconds. I'm going to stop sharing. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to put that out while I make the changes to the question. So Harsha, what do you do? Are you studying? Are you working? You can also kind of feel free to introduce introduce yourselves to one another. Hi, Narayan. So why the interest? Finally, your BTech. Okay, good. What about you, Narayan? Okay, let me just scroll this down because I'm not able to see. Hi, Prakash, BCCS. Okay, I'm preparing for bank PO. All right. Welcome here, because it's still the same questions, right? Even if it's a bank exam. Okay, I think we're good. I'm just going to share this again so we can get started where we left off. Okay, great. So there are 5 sentences here. Let's see. The steps in this particular pattern is pretty simple, right? We just need to identify the topic sentence and then move from there. So the best thing for you to do is, again, look for repeat words or look for keywords. If caught in the act, right? Understand expressions and see and ask questions. That's another strategy that we apply. If caught in the act, what act are they referring to? There must be a sentence which is talking about. So if caught in the act, meaning something obviously negative, something that should not be done, right? Because something that you're doing which is not right or something that is wrong. So you need to look for a sentence that is making reference to that. For me, if I look at A, B, C, D, E, just focusing on this particular phrase, if caught in the act, and if you ask the question, what act is this referring to, right? And you look for the answer. That will be your sequence. And if I look at all my sentences, anybody can answer, Prakash or Narayan or even Harsha. Out of B, C, D, E, can you identify which sentence is answering that question? It's an incorrect act. It's an act that is wrong, obviously. Are you able to identify which sentence that is? Okay, Harsha, you're giving me a sentence which is a very sad thing that is happening, right? Where they're saying soldiers that were very weak were left to die. That's a very sad thing. But here, this expression, like I said, it is referring to they were punished. I want you to pay attention to the rest of the sentence also, right? Male children were examined at birth by the city council and those deemed too weak to become soldiers were left to die of exposure. I don't think these male children were punished. There was something else in the context that is referring to punished, not for the crime, yes, hi Dinesh, but for allowing themselves to be caught another lash of the whip. I want you to think logically. Okay, that's one way you can approach this. Another thing is also to be familiar with certain words in the context. For example, bellicose Spartans. I don't know if you guys watched 300 Men, right? Where the movie, it talks about Spartan warriors, right? The 300 of them. So basically, they are a group of elite warriors from ancient Greece, and they're located on the island province of Sparta. So I can immediately connect the bellicose Spartans, right? They are trained from infancy to be nothing but soldiers. That's what they do. That's their mission, life mission. So that's another clue word that you can fall back on. And then look at what are connecting sentences. So coming back to our first approach, if caught in the act is referring to here in D. I gave ample time, none of you were able to identify that. Forced to steal food to survive, right? So in this context, it's saying they stole food. Now, if at all, while they were stealing food, if they were caught in the act, now this act refers to stealing food. So you have a direct connect. D and A is a connect. Now let's look at bellicose Spartans in C. Now that we have some sort of a history, the sentences that expand on how these guys are trained, if you look at C and E, for example, C says, those fortunate enough to survive babyhood were taken away from their mothers at the age of 7 to undergo rigorous military training. E says, male children were examined at birth by the city council and those deemed too weak to become soldiers were left to die of exposure. So this is how they were selected to become a part of this elite group of warriors, right? So E and C is expanding on how this military life was. So for me, if you ask me, B kind of sets the context, right? It introduces the bellicose Spartans and says the entire passage is revolving around these guys and how they are selected and how their military life is. So B is our topic sentence, setting that context with the bellicose Spartans. So if you're familiar with Spartans and Sparta, you can quickly relate to what we're talking about. So B, E, C. So at birth, how they were selected, and then in terms of just logical sequence, right? When you're born, what happens, and then if you survive babyhood, then what happens, right? In terms of just time sequence, E has to follow B preceding C. So B, E, C, and then D, A. So what was the rigorous military training? D. This consisted mainly of beating and deprivations of all kinds, like going around barefoot in winter and worse, starvation, so that they would be forced to steal food to survive. That's correct. Aditya, the sequence is B, E, C, D, A. That's your sequence, right? So the only thing that you could miss out is if you are not familiar with Spartans and if you're not able to logically connect what this act is, right? The act, why were they punished? If caught in the act. Normally, this phrase is used for, when you're cheating or when you're stealing or when you're robbing. Just imagine that, visualize the picture, right? If some small kid steals something from the shop and run away, if caught in the act, he's punished. While you're cheating in the exam, if caught in the act, you're punished, right? So it usually has to do with some sort of a reprimand is required there, that sort of an act. So Aditya is right in the sequence that he gave, BEC, BA. Here again, without a topic sentence, we still have to figure out what is the overall context revolving around, right? They were punished. Who is the they referring to? Everything, if you see, those fortunate. Who is the those fortunate? This consisted, which means you're talking about some sort of a program. Thank you, Aditya. No issues. No problem. I'm glad it helped you. Right? So this consists mainly of beating, blah, blah, blah. So there we go. This is one pattern. Let's move on to other patterns. So anybody has any questions before we move to the next question pattern? So the first pattern, we said only two things we applied there. We kept looking at the sequence, narrowed down our options, right? And identify keywords and ask questions. In this particular pattern, again, what we did is we focused on certain phrases. And then again, we asked questions. Asking questions is an awesome way to logically connect sentences. Rohan, okay, I don't know what that point E is for. Maybe I just got your message a little late. Okay. All right, Rohan, I don't know what that was for, but you've removed the message. So I'm just going to move forward with our next pattern. Oh, now if you get the sequence right, you know what to do, right? Let's quickly complete the question. BECDA. So which is following. And another thing that I keep sharing to my students is, because this is just the first step, right? Getting the sequence right. The next step is marking it correctly so you get your full 5 points. That's another place where a lot of us make mistakes. So it's easier, just a small tip, quickly number the sequence. So you won't make a mistake because we're already nervous in the exam. The time is not favoring us and we're running short of time. So it's very likely that you might end up making silly mistakes and identifying the wrong answer, even if you get the sequence right. So I always keep saying this to my students, number it so it's easier for you to get your full 5 points. So which of the following would be the first? B, second E, third C, fourth D, and fifth is first, second, third, fourth. Okay, this is asked the fifth, which is A. That's it, right? And sometimes pay attention because not always the questions will come in the same sequence. Luckily, in this question, it says first, second, third, fourth, fifth, but it keeps jumbling, right? Sometimes you might have the second sentence first, fifth sentence as a second question, and so on and so forth. Let's move on. The next sort of a pattern, which is a sentence jumble. It's not a para jumble, it's a sentence jumble, right? So in each question below, it says there is a sentence of which some parts have been jumbled up. The initial part and the closing part of the sentence is provided. So let's quickly sequence that. So let's say this is the initial part, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, right? Rearrange the parts which are labeled PQRS to produce the correct sentence. Choose the proper sequence. For this sort of a pattern, again, we keep looking at the options, right? Each option starts with Q, S, P, R, and P. So we need to pay attention to that. And I always say this, for this sort of a pattern, the best thing to do is to identify the subject first, right? Then you identify the action, and then you go ahead and form the remaining sequence. Now, lucky for us, because the initial part is already there, I reasoned with him. So, when you're reasoning with somebody, you're trying to kind of logically come to a conclusion. You're explaining something logically, right? You're saying, hey, the reason why I'm saying this is because I have some facts and I know something about somebody or whatever, right? So, when you're reasoning with whoever, it's either about something or you can be reasoning for some amount of time, right? So the next logical sequence will have to be looking at the options. You will have to figure out, hey, is it telling me that, is it giving me a time frame somewhere, or is it talking about what is it that they are reasoning? So I reasoned with him, and then I have a time frame, which is R, for an hour, right? And I have that in the option, yes, Aditya is right again. I have that in the option 3. Now let's quickly see if it makes sense. RPSQ. I reasoned with him for an hour, but could not disabuse him of the notion that the lawyer who had his case in hand was incompetent. Right? So basically, when we logically unravel it, yes, Rohan, you're also correct. Another way to approach this, let's say, hey, I did not use this strategy that you said. I'm a little confused. Another way to approach this is also to identify keywords, right? Disabuse, that's your keyword here. What is the meaning of disabuse? For those of you who don't know, disabuse means you are trying to persuade someone that either an idea or a belief is mistaken. Right? So in this case, in this scenario, this person is telling the other person, hey, let me tell you something. You need to know this, that this lawyer that you hired, right, is not the right guy. Yes, he's arguing, he's trying to prove a point, and he's saying, boss, whoever you hired as your lawyer is not good, is incompetent, right? That's what he's trying to say. So RPSQ, that's the logical sequence. And the reason why I said disabuse is your keyword is okay, because you're always talking about, you're trying to persuade or convince someone about an idea or a belief that you're mistaken. A notion means idea. So if you're familiar with the word disabuse, you know that PNS is a link, right? That's another way to do this. In case you are unable to apply the first strategy, right? So this is another way of looking at it. Let's look at another pattern, right? This is, in each question below there is a sentence with some parts. It's the same thing. It's just that we don't have like a closing part. We just have the initial part, and then it's the same strategy, PQRS. You'd have to choose Jawaharlal Nehru, and then you have under the cabinet mission scheme was the first to articulate, long before such an assembly was set up, the idea of a constituent assembly. Again, I have different starting sentences, SRPQ. Okay. So quickly, you can go via asking questions. You can identify keywords, look for connecting, linking phrases. Harsha and Aditya have given me an answer. Anybody else wants to quickly try? And Rohan also got it right? So who was the first to articulate? Jawaharlal Nehru, right? So Jawaharlal Nehru was the first to articulate the idea of a constituent assembly long before such an assembly was set up. So such an assembly, that's another key phrase in case you're confused. Such an assembly is referring to constituent assembly. So R has to follow S. And if you look at the sequence, except option 2, 1, 3, and 4 are following S as a link, right? But then we just have to make logical sense. And yes, as 3 of you pointed out, option 4 is the right answer. So what I want to do, take time and do is, let's just summarize some of the strategies that we normally apply, whether it's para jumbles or sentence jumbles, and quickly take a look at it. Right? I want you to kind of apply this on most of your or all of your jumble sentences questions. And remember, you can have 1 or 2 or even more than 3, 4 strategies that will work in a particular sequence or in a particular question. So let me just quickly share. Okay, I put it down here itself. There you go. So when it's para jumbles, right? You guys can also, I'm sure you've seen other videos, and if you have anything new to contribute in terms of your own strategy that you've come up with, please feel free to share that, right? Because we're learning from each other as well. So one of the first things, some of the strategies that you can apply is focus on keywords and ask questions like we did. Right? Another thing is pay attention to phrases, right? And then again, you can ask questions like how we saw in some of the questions that we just did. Also, focus on clue words. When I say clue words, I'm talking about descriptive clue words, right? Contrasting clue words, but, rather, while, cause and effect clue words, because, since, as, right? Sequence, something that gives a sequence. First, then, later, next, initially, finally, subsequently, right? So look for these clue words, and then you can logically connect sentences. Pay attention to repeat words in the context, right? Why do we need to pay attention to repeat words? One, it will help us identify the topic sentence. It will also give us certain sentences that are a link, right? The sentence has to go with this sentence. Pay attention to repeat words because it will help us form links, and it will also help us identify the first sentence, the topic sentence. What is the entire passage about? What is the main idea? What is the crux of the context? And a little bit of knowledge on vocabulary, right, can also be very helpful. Like we saw in the last one, right? Disabuse, not the last one. So knowledge on vocabulary can be very helpful in linking words. So Aditya shared, he says we can also go further by cancelling out the options. Yes, that's why it's important when you have options A, B, C, D to keep looking at them, right? And you don't have to break your head to figure out the entire sequence. If you form or identify one link, it's more than enough for you to choose the right answer. Exactly. So thanks for sharing that, Aditya. Anybody else, feel free to share. Maybe you have other strategies that you apply for para jumbles or sentence jumbles. Right? And sometimes it's also good to pay attention to punctuation marks. That can also help you figure out the sequence, especially in sentence jumbles. And get familiar with idioms and phrases, right? And collocations. Good for, very useful for sentence jumbles, right? Grouping of words. This word will go with this word, otherwise called as collocations, right? So this is for para jumbles. For sentence jumbles, yeah, it is very, very useful. Punctuation marks as well. So for sentence jumbles, there's nothing much. Like I say, you identify the subject, you identify the action, and then you connect the remaining parts and create the sentence. So Aditya, Rohan, Harsha, and the rest of you, if you have any questions, we can take time to, I can take time to answer that. Any other question type, that you probably have a question or a doubt, we can do that. Let me just stop sharing this for a minute. Right? And for those of you who are not aware, we have a whole load of programs that we run, right? But these are, you can log on to our website, www.talentsprint.com/IT. These programs are exclusively classroom based, and you can still take advantage of that. If you want to understand where the locations are, you can go and browse our website and understand that. I just wanted to talk about some features that we do have, for these programs. Like, for example, a lot of us have a concern with, getting placed, obviously, right? So I think it's important for us to have as many opportunities as possible to get placed. And that's something that we do have. We have a 3-month unlimited placement access, which you can take advantage of. We have almost about 100 drives per month. In a month, we have 100 drives per month. We have 750 plus recruiters, that approach us and select candidates. So I think it's important, given the situation at hand, that we have those opportunities to get placed, right? So please go ahead and take a look at what we have to offer, and I'm sure you'll benefit out of that. And most importantly, do practice these strategies and concepts that we are sharing, right? Because practice at the end of the day is key. If you want to stand out, and given the competition that is there, with the limited number of seats and positions that are available, given the current scenario, if you need to qualify, which means you need to do something over and above what the other guys do, right? So keep doing that, and thank you so much for actively participating. And if you have any questions, or if you are looking at specific question types that you find challenging, please let us know. We'll be more than glad to take that up in our forthcoming sessions. So all the best, and keep practicing. I will see you guys with another interesting topic in our next session. Keep watching this space. We will have other sessions on quantitative aptitude, reasoning, and computer programming. So take care, guys, and have a nice weekend.